Hello. I want to talk about the future. Now, be aware, the future is a complicated topic. I'm basically, with this video, creating a kind of broad template. I'm purposefully not covering all the particulars. It would be much longer than it already is, trust me. The flow of this video might sound less than linear, but hopefully I'll hit enough points that you get the general reasoning behind my argument. I'll state my argument and then describe the result, should my argument prove correct. As you listen, if you have a suggestion about a video addressing a particular aspect of this idea, feel free to suggest it in the comments. I'll be expanding on this idea in the future anyway, but I'd like to know if you, the listener, want to hear about something specific. Now, on to the discussion. I've heard a lot of talk in the community for a while about an impending collapse of civilization. A lot of it stemming from the correct assumption that men are the glue, the strength and foundation that holds society together, and that women are as a whole so irresponsible that big government will eventually collapse under its own weight, or eventually men will no longer be available to do the work required to keep civilization together. However, we are living in a new paradigm. Look at the great civilizations now piled high on the rubbish heap of history. Rome is the first great republic we all likely think of. It was a modern culture, thriving. It controlled the world. It produced so many of the great things that built the modern world, from technological advances such as aqueducts, road systems, representative government, great writing, history, and science. Then, well, religion happened. Constantine undermined much of Roman allegiance by putting the Christian God above himself. The Roman Empire was divided into eastern and western territories, and eventually Rome fell to the Germanic barbarians. The cause of the collapse of the Roman Empire were many, including inflation, piracy, trade disruptions, poorly defended capital at just the wrong moment, loss of military control, divided religious practices. The list goes on. Great empires never tend to fall for one reason or one other. It always tends to be a dirty snowball that builds and builds until finally, reaching critical mass, the little snowball has become an avalanche which can't be held up against any outside invader. Most of the time, the final move is invasion, which causes leadership and ownership to change hands. Now, back to the present. I don't think society will fall or collapse. There's a critical factor we live with now, which has never existed before in history: globalization. Globalization has exported sovereign currencies for world trade. Why does this matter? One currency affects another. It is in every nation's best interest to ensure that no sovereign reserve currency simply collapses overnight. Thus we have the IMF, central banks, international foreign exchange markets, and multinational governmental structures like the UN and NATO, which ensures cooperation between nations. With so much cooperation and interdependency, it is unlikely that any major Western power can collapse with any sudden momentum. Secondly, multinational companies provide goods and services to nations on multiple continents. Take the standard Republican obsession with our public debt, which is now over 100% in the US, and the automatic assumption that China can destroy us because they buy all our debt. Well, sorry to tell you all, but China owns about as much of our debt as Japan. It varies around $2 trillion for both countries combined, and has for a while now. And they are the largest foreign individual owners of our debt notes. Does anyone really think that China is buying our debt to fund the federal deficit? No. The Fed buys treasury notes to fund the government. Social Security is borrowed from private investors, and banks buy treasury notes. We owe ourselves, essentially. Foreign debt is not a major concern, and as such, foreign countries owning our debt is really not a threat at all to our economic or political stability. The problem is really about investor confidence. If we default on our debt payments, our currency, stock market, international trading position, and other major factors could be at risk due to a lack of trust that the full faith and credit of the US is not risk-free, as it is considered to be now. The point is, the boy is crying wolf. No, the sky is not falling, and we aren't on the brink of a currency crisis, as you might hear in the news. The US dollar is very strong, which really says more about the global economy than the US. Our shit smells better than everyone else's shit, but it's still shit. Please don't eat it. There's so much interdependency on supply lines, both to wholesale and retail customers, and international collaboration with multinational companies, as I spoke to earlier. A collapse of one major power means severe economic hardship for another. As such, all involved nations are keen to keep things running smoothly. Most commodities are traded in international trading houses, and spot prices are set by traders around the globe. If one country can't supply itself with enough, say, grain, there are many alternatives. As such, no major state is left without options to feed and run itself, assuming its currency doesn't encounter runaway inflation like Venezuela is dealing with now. But again, there are fixes for this too. Just look at Greece. Finally, knowledge is becoming standardized. Major Western powers have a well-entrenched history of human rights codes, starting with the Nuremberg Code of Ethics, onto which piled a mountain of research and textbooks all about what and what not to do. Science and technology development are often collaborative ventures, with many states finding cooperation is far more beneficial to its respective bottom line, and thus, unlike the Cold War, major technology wars are becoming less and less onerous as time moves forward.
Space Station is the culminating engineering effort of 15 countries.
The only real problem is cyber warfare. Major ground conflicts such as world wars and carpet bombings are practically a skeleton of history at this point. This is an age of precision attacks, special operation missions, and guerrilla warfare. In fact, I'd say, if we don't elect another George Bush, I wonder why the US military couldn't, in good conscience, draw down its troop levels even more than Obama is, and focus on expanding its smart military initiatives, which rely almost exclusively on high-tech, small unit deployments, a few very large home-based military installations, and limited numbers of highly capable stealth, sea, and airborne weapons systems, heavily armed but few in number. Do we even need tanks anymore? And if you're part of an armor regiment, please don't think I'm bashing you. Just hear me out. I'm talking about future warfare. I'm not lobbying for Congress to cut your funding. Put your K-bar down and leave your computer screen alone. What I'm getting at here is, how could First World Society collapse with all these support structures in place? It's not a matter of feminism fucking things up. It's a matter of international economics. I just don't see it. This has been part 1 of this 4-part series, The Future of MGTOW. The entire discussion can also be seen as a single video if you prefer a longer format. In this first part, I discussed some reasons why I don't believe Western society, or any major Western power for that matter, will collapse in the way ancient civilizations collapsed. In the second part, I will continue this line of thinking and expand it to explain what is wrong with the job market which feminism has created, explain why men have lost their position in society, and I hope to make you extremely morose and depressed. But don't gouge your eyes out just yet. I believe there is hope in the end, if we will do what we need to do. Part 2 is nightfall, with sadness, mourning, and weeping. But part 3 is the dawn of man. Stay tuned.